Peace, what's going on, everybody? This is video number 2, getting on the roll. Today, just gonna kind of expound on the first video. It's just basically just an introduction of myself. Like I said, my name is Bigger, because I'm bigger than you, standing at 6'8.5". That's a nickname that one of the homies gave me growing up. I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I'm 47 years old, born in 74. So I say all of that to say that I grew up in Brooklyn during the crack epidemic, right? And the reason that that's important is because that was a very different kind of ghetto than the ghetto that my parents were raised in, and definitely a different kind of ghetto than the ghetto that is now. But it kind of was the foundation for my generation, right? What I mean by that, just to give a little bit of background, you had a lot of drug dealing, right? Which meant that you had a lot of drug taking, which means that you had a lot of our parents and a lot of our friends and older siblings and aunties and uncles and stuff like that. These people were either getting locked up for selling drugs, getting locked up for using drugs and being an addict, or being murdered or killed or overdosing or just being in the streets. So that left a lot of kind of broken homes and a lot of like grandparents and stuff like that to raise children. My situation wasn't quite that extreme. My mom did have habits, but she was not into like the freebasing or the crack like that at all. So it was more party drugs and partying. And at the same time, she was raised by the same woman who ended up raising me, my great-grandmother, her grandmother. And the reason for that, for her being raised by her grandmother, was because when she was 2 years old, her mom had OD'd. So that just gives you a little bit of background into just the way that drugs kind of interact with, with my life, at least, right? As far as my mom and dad, from when I was born, they had already broken up. I never had any kind of a relationship with him. I was told certain things when I was a kid, and as I got older and started to kind of cross-reference, I found out that not all of that was necessarily true. I did grow up, being perfect, if I'm going to be honest, feeling a lot of resentment towards him because I didn't get to know him. I have a sister, who he fathered as well, and she did get to know him. She had a relationship with him, so I've always been kind of jealous of that. Then factor in the fact that my brother and sister, their dad was extremely abusive to me as I was growing up, which kind of led to a whole nother kind of situation, which I will eventually get into. But there's just a lot of different factors that go into my psychological development as a kid, and those things carried on obviously into my adulthood. And I'm just now at the point where I'm able to recognize those things and willing to actually put a fix to them. So, well, let's see, what else can I tell you about me? You already know, from Brooklyn, crack era, all of that. I did, full disclosure, I did definitely take part in the whole drug trade. That was just the way that we did in my area, in my neck of the woods. I pretty much sold just about everything. I never really experimented. I do smoke weed, I smoke cigarettes, I drink light, but other than that, really for me, it was just about the money and the acceptance that came with being in the streets and doing all the kinds of things that I was doing. One of the things that I've realized about myself is, while I like to boast that I'm an introvert, the reality is that I crave acceptance from everybody all the time. And I think that for me, I've kind of developed this kind of callous where I don't expect it from everybody, even though I'm still going after it. And that's kind of like a defense mechanism. But growing up, for example, I've always been big. I was a lot heavier than I am now, but I was always the tall one, the big one. So I was the one that people would come to when they had a problem and they wanted somebody to defend them. I ended up most of the time being called into that role, and because I wanted the acceptance and felt like if I put myself in that position for these people that that they would like me pretty much. So that kind of came into play. And then one of the things that I realized really early on was the fact that because I was fat, girls wasn't really rocking with me. But once I started hustling and started dressing a little better, had diamonds really wasn't that big a deal back then. It wasn't what we concentrated on back in my day. It was like rope chains and stuff like that. So as long as I had a big rope chain and a fly tracksuit on, I was able to bag the girls. And again, all of this is going back to my desire, my need, my want for that acceptance. And the reason why I'm kind of leading with that is because going back right to the foundation of my mental development, that's one of the first things that kind of started to define bigger as a person, right? When I was young, as I told you, my sister and brother's father, who all things being fair, he also had a drug issue. He was extremely abusive to me. I'm not quite sure why. I do know, and this is not me trying to find any kind of justification, and just stating the facts. I have always been a chronic asthmatic, and I used to take this medicine called Cribolon, and part of the side effects was it used to make me pee the bed. So that I know was definitely a point of contingency for him, because he didn't really understand. And in all fairness, it wasn't like how nowadays how they put the side effects and all of that and give you a warning. Like, nobody really knew what it was. So the defining moment in that relationship, in that dynamic, was one day I woke up, I peed the bed, got up, changed my clothes, and my mom told me that my stepdad was outside and my cousin was outside, and they were all going to go to the park and play some ball. And more importantly, they had my basketball that I got for my birthday, right? So I wash up, I get dressed, they still downstairs or whatever. I get in the car. Next thing I know, I'm literally getting dragged out the car through the window. Like, I'm not making this up. Long story short, that ended up being one of the only times that my mother actually defended me to this man, right? And it resulted in him getting kicked out. I believe that he put hands on her. Like, it was a whole thing for sure. Shortly after that, I remember going to my mother and telling her, look, because he had came back to the house or whatever, for whatever reason. I guess they made up. So I told my mom, like, look, I can't keep going through this. Mind you, I'm like 6-7 years old, probably a little younger than that, but at least 6-7 years old. And I told my mom, I can't keep going through this. If he's gonna be here, I don't want to live here. And her response to me was, well, let me talk to your grandmother and see what she got to say about that. So basically, in that moment, she chose that relationship with him over me. And this is probably a justification. I'm not going to front. I've always kind of put it in my head like it was important for her to be with my sister's father because she wasn't with my father, and maybe like she thought that was going to be some kind of trade, or thought I was going to get over it, or I don't really know, to tell you the truth. Bottom line is, she made a choice. You know what I'm saying? I had already spoken to my grandmother about it beforehand, and my grandmother's response was, well, you already know you can stay here, but your mother's gonna do the right thing. Don't worry about it. I think she knew that my mother wasn't gonna do the right thing, but that's neither here nor there. So at that point in my life, at 6, 7, maximum 8 years old, I realized that I was not accepted, or I felt rather that I wasn't accepted or loved by my mom, right? And that created a kind of dynamic within me that made me seek that acceptance and that love outside. And that is probably where, in my opinion, and from what I'm gathering from my therapy sessions, that is probably why I was open to the start of me selling drugs and getting into that game, and why I continued into that and veered into the lifestyle that I ended up leading, which, you know, if I'm being honest, I probably took the kind of chances that I definitely took penitentiary chances, and I definitely took chances in my life that could have resulted in me not being here to even make these videos. So that's another reason why it's important to me to make these videos, because I was out there doing things in the world and I knew what I was doing, but I wasn't aware of what the motivation was or the compulsion was for me to do these things. And if I had that understanding and I would have been able to combat those issues, then I would have made better choices. So again, the point and purpose of me doing what I'm doing right now is, while it's definitely therapeutic for myself just to kind of get this out, and you know, whether people interact with it or not, it's still a form of therapy for me. But at the same time, the reason I'm sharing these stories and sharing these things about myself is because I believe that there's going to be some commonality found with somebody out there. You know what I'm saying? And if not, that's great. That means that I'm the only person that had a life that's fucked up, which it is what it is. You know what I mean? But I'm sure that there's other people out there that are going to be able to draw from some of the experiences that I've had, or it may even spark something that makes them think about an experience that they had, and you know, the decisions and choices and the dynamic that created. So with that being said, I don't really have like a catchphrase. Like, I had a channel before and I used to say this thing, but I'm not gonna say that now because it doesn't really apply. So with that, I guess I'm gonna just say peace and good mental health to everybody. One love.